Hi everyone. Quite a lot to report from this week. Our waiting and worrying seems to be almost over. Just this morning, Motorsport UK announced that they are going to start issuing permits for race meetings from the weekend of the 4th of July. A week or so ago, they put out all of their updated guidelines for how we're going to race safely, despite the coronavirus outbreak. A lot of distancing measures being enforced and as much official procedure being done remotely or online before meetings. And another thing pertinent to us, adding extra time in pit stops to allow for the driver getting in to plug himself in unaided and to have time to disinfect the car before doing so. So it sounds like it's been quite well thought out, the document's quite extensive. We'll see how clubs are going to run meetings, but it sounds like once the initial suspension that was announced ages ago of 30th of June has passed, we'll be able to carry on. So clubs are trying to keep their calendars as intact as possible, trying to keep all the original meetings in place from July onwards. If that happens, then my first race meeting of this season should be at Snetterton in James Lewis Barnard's Mazda 7 on the 19th of July. If not that, for any reason, then the next one on the calendar is at Silverstone in Road Sports, with Ian Thornton also in the car on the 8th of August. We'll be sharing that race in 780 Motor Club's Road Sports Series. It's not confirmed yet. The calendars remain very much provisional because we're waiting for the British Touring Car Championship, British Superbikes and the Grand Prix to be confirmed, and then club racing will fit around it as far as possible. But really encouraging noises coming out of 750 Motor Club. They have said that they're aiming to get every series out for at least 4 meetings, which is a lot more than many of us could have expected in just half a year's racing. So that's really positive, and it does feel like we're going to get some good outings despite everything. Great news. The hard part, I don't think it'll be racing, I think it'll be testing. Track days have resumed at a lot of circuits now, and are fully booked all the way through June and a little bit into July already, so trying to get any testing done will be difficult. Track days of course are open to non-competitive vehicles as well, so our lean-to there will be using motorsport test days the day before a meeting. It's not so handy for development work because of course there's very little time to correct any problems you find, but at least for driver installation and for setting the car up for the circuit, we'll be able to do that. Car itself is in quite good shape, it's almost ready to go. Over the last week I've put in a bit of work on the tools. The rebuilt diff with its 8 plates and its slightly longer ratio, a 5% longer final drive ratio, is already in the car, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. But I had a lot of steering and suspension parts to replace. Parts donated by James Butts, E36, thank you very much. A quicker ratio steering rack. The standard E36 rack is 3.4 turns lock to lock, which if you have a lot of oversteer is a bit like driving a bus, flailing the wheel through the hands. And this one here is only 3 turns, so it doesn't sound drastic, but that is enough to give it a more positive feel on turning and also a quicker response if we have to do some drastic correction. A bit of expressive driving happening out there, and particularly in the wet. Also replaced the front lower wishbones and the track rods at the same time, and a lot of these parts are original, so an interesting piece of work for me, work that I've never done on this car before, parts that have probably never been off it, certainly not in my ownership, but probably never in its 23 years. Nothing give up too much of a fight, went reasonably smoothly, and the car as it sits now is ready to go out. The only thing it's waiting on, which isn't absolutely necessary, is a stiffer set of springs. I'm going up around about 20%, 25% in spring rate, and getting a couple of different options for front and rear. This is because I've always felt the car is a little bit too soft on the standard springs that came with the gas gold suspension, and having options, particularly for the rear, which can be changed quite quickly in the pits, probably not during a race, but over the course of a weekend certainly, will allow me to tune the setup and also possibly to have different wet and dry setups, if there seems to be a big advantage in doing so. So that feels like it's in quite good shape. If there's a bit of time left before going out, either on a track day or for the first race, then a little bit of aero improvements. The front splitter is probably considered a consumable on most race cars, and mine after 2 years service is looking distinctly second hand. So I'll build a new one of those, possibly have some dive planes on the front as well, just to help turn in at high speed, where the car can feel a little bit more understeery than I'd like. That's it for the car, I think. I had some questions in from John Munro, one of my competitors in the Club Enduro Championship last season. If you could choose any 3 cars from Club Enduro to have a shot at racing for a one-off event, which would you choose and why? First off, John, I'd have your car. Partly to keep you out of it for a race, but also because I just want to see what it's like. John's been setting pole positions and fastest laps galore over the course of last season, and I really want to know what that TWP Racing MX-5 handles like, what it's like to drive, how easy it is to extract that kind of lap time out of it. I want to measure myself a little bit. I'd also like to try a Boxster. There's been a few Caymans and a few Boxsters, 986 Boxsters in particular, racing against us in Club Enduro. I mentioned them before a couple of weeks ago in response to a question. Two reasons for it. Firstly, I do love a good racing Porsche and I love the noise they make. I'd like to see what it's like to drive an attainable Class B car, the class above where I am at the moment, just to see how much performance that feels like. But most of all because I have one as a road car, and I really want to know how well it adapts into circuit racing, because that's something that might be in the distant future of my own one. Be interesting. If I can have one more, they're not strictly allowed in Club Enduro, but came in as an invitational car a couple of times, was a Ginetta G55, a purpose-built racing car, a GT car that's normally seen in Britcar or the GT Cup or something like that. I'd love to try that, a ground-up race car, just to see how it behaves, and to try and get a handle on that level of performance. That's probably where I could see myself ending up in a number of years' time with a very successful budget to support me. I think they'd be fantastic things to drive. Next one, you can have 5 years in British Touring Car Championship and then nothing, or 10 full seasons of club racing. Which do you go for and why? This is interesting because I really enjoyed the spectacle of British touring cars. Fabulous racing to watch, and quite a ticket to be involved in. John's not giving me anything to go on whether I'm a cushy paid driver, if I'm having to fight for sponsorship all through my 5 seasons, don't know. But either way, I think I'm going to take the club racing. 10 full seasons, let's say full seasons, let's say that we're actually going through different championships. On a tiny fraction of the budget needed to run in touring cars, I could do several series across, even say only in 750 Motor Club. I could do an endurance championship, I could do a single-seater sprint race championship, I could do historics, I could do all sorts of things on a fraction of the budget, sometimes racing 3 or 4 cars in the same weekend even. And I just think you'd have so much fun and get to experience so much close racing with perhaps a little bit more respect than you sometimes see from competitors in touring cars. So I'd go for that, not just for the longer period of racing, which I'd really like to have, but because of the amount of variety I think I'll be able to get out of it. I think that would be much better. What about you? More next week, guys. If you have extra questions, please keep them coming. A little bit more on the car next week, I think, because it should be looking reasonably ready to go. And I'm hoping that we'll have a race calendar confirmed in the not too distant future. Thanks, guys.